Welcome to the 2022-2023 California Foster Youth FAFSA and CADAA Challenge Kickoff webinar. I am Sarah Potter. I'm a Senior Project Manager over at John Burton Advocates for Youth, and I'm really excited to have you join us today. I have a great lineup of co-presenters who you will meet along the way. So very quickly, here is our agenda for the day. We're going to do a quick round of introductions using chat, and then I'll share a bit about the FAFSA challenge, including the updated policies and procedures for 2022-23. We'll also spend some time talking about verifying FAFSA and CADAA completion using web grants. My colleague Jessica Petras will be sharing information on the new WinSCP secure file transfer system. And then we have a presentation from the California Department of Education. Our colleague, Deborah Avalos, will be talking about SB 860 as it pertains to the new sort of FAFSA for all mandate. Then we're going to toss it over to Los Angeles County Office of Ed, as well as Los Angeles County Probation, and they're going to talk about the work that they've done to increase FAFSA and CADAA completion amongst dual jurisdiction foster youth. And then we're going to end with a panel presentation from some of our counties who've had a lot of success with the FAFSA and CADAA challenge over the years. And this will be a really great opportunity for attendees to also ask questions and determine sort of what strategies have worked for them. And then, of course, we're going to end sharing lots of our resources and instructions on how to get any sort of technical assistance or training throughout the duration of the challenge. So to help us kind of get a sense of who is joining us today, if you could please utilize the chat box or the chat feature to share your name, your county, your role with the FAFSA and CADAA challenge, as well as your completion rate goal for 2022-23. So please drop that into the chat. Again, your name, your county, your role with the challenge, and your goal for 22-23. So before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts of the challenge, I wanted to open a little bit with a refresher on why we focus so much on college. So when we looked at data from the last recession in 2007, 2008, we saw that nearly 5.5 million jobs for people who had a high school diploma or less just evaporated. When the stock market and the economy began to decline, these jobs just disappeared. They did not come back. And as the economy began to recover and more jobs were added to the labor market, those jobs were reserved for people who had an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or higher. So the point being, of course, that post-secondary education is really strongly linked to not only higher wages, but also the less likelihood of unemployment when there's economic decline. So this is a really important sort of indicator and one that we often share. The other really important piece and sort of the driver behind the Foster Youth FAFSA and CADAA challenge was that we know that so many foster youth indicate that they want to go to college. They have the aspiration to pursue post-secondary education. And when surveyed, nearly 86% indicated that desire. But ultimately, only 55% enrolled. And then by age 23, only around 10 to 11% of foster youth end up completing a 2- or 4-year degree. We have focused so much on FAFSA and financial aid application completion, including the Chafee grant, because we know that financial aid makes a significant difference and is really helps to bridge that divide between the aspirations and the realities. And so we know from research that high school seniors who complete the FAFSA are 63% more likely to end up enrolling in a higher education program. We also know that the amount of financial aid makes a significant difference. So for students who received $1,000 to $2,000 in financial aid, only 17% ended up transferring to a 4-year program or completing their 2-year degree. When that amount of aid was increased to $7,500, 49% ended up transferring or graduating. So again, this really points to the fact that financial aid is the greatest single indicator as to whether or not a student ends up successfully matriculating and persisting until program completion. So that is really sort of the thinking behind the FAFSA and CADAA challenge for foster youth, because we've known from research over the years that foster youth have not completed the FAFSA at the same rate as their non-foster youth peers. So jumping into the FAFSA and CADAA challenge, the challenge originally launched in 2017. So we're now entering our 6th year come October 1st. Foster Youth Services coordinating programs serve as the central coordinators of the challenge. And what that means is that they really work with all of the partners in their communities, including ILP, child welfare, the court-appointed special advocates programs, and the colleges to work with foster youth students on completing their financial aid applications. Again, we always like to emphasize here that the expectation isn't necessarily that the FYCPs are going to be the ones who sit down and work with every single foster youth on completing the FAFSA or CADAA application, but really that they're coordinating the partners who are providing that type of high-touch support and making sure that they have the resources and knowledge to ensure that the students are completing their financial aid applications correctly. That ensures that they end up maximizing the amount of aid that they're eligible for. And again, the more aid that they can get, the better in terms of academic outcomes and persistence. The other really important factor in terms of the FAFSA and CADAA challenge is making sure that FYSCPs are verifying that the FAFSA and CADAA was correctly submitted. And so we have forged a relationship with the California Student Aid Commission to use their web grants database, which we can access to definitively verify that a FAFSA or CADAA was completed. That has been a really important factor for the challenge over the past few years, as we found that verbal reports or verbal confirmation that the FAFSA was completed aren't always accurate. So this really helps us to get access to the data that confirms that the application was indeed submitted. My colleague Jessica will be talking a little bit more about web grants later on. So really exciting to share that over the past 6 years, we've seen that the Foster Youth FAFSA CADAA challenge has worked. So back in 2017, when the challenge first launched, we had a 45% statewide completion rate. That completion rate has increased nearly 20% since the start of the challenge. In 2019 and 2020, we reached a 65% completion rate. We did see a decline due to COVID during the 2020-2021 challenge, but we are starting to see an increase. So just this past year, we've reached 62.8%. So we're starting to see, again, an increase in the number of FAFSA and CADAA applications for foster youth. One really important thing to note that I'm always really excited to share is that in 2019-20 and 21-22, foster youth in California completed the FAFSA application at a rate higher than the general high school senior population, which I think, again, just really points to the success of this challenge and of all of the work that our FYSCPs are doing on the ground. So thank you. And our goal, I will say, drum roll please, for 22-23 is that we will reach a statewide 70% completion rate. And we know that we can't do that without all of you. And so we're really excited to share some winning strategies today. So in terms of the policies and procedures for this year's FAFSA and CADAA challenge, not much has changed when it comes to determining the baseline. It includes all 12th graders in foster care, regardless of credit count. So that includes students who are on a non-diploma track, as well as those who are on a special education certificate of completion track. It also includes students in family maintenance and family reunification. As just a general rule of thumb, if that student shows up on your 5.7 report or your foster youth report of high school seniors from Foster Focus, they should be included in the baseline. A requirement of the challenge is also that the FAFSA CADAA is verified as completed using web grants. We have shifted as well the reporting deadlines for this year, so this is something to note. So the first round of reports will encompass the October 1st through March 2nd sort of priority deadline. And that report will be due to JBA by March 24th, 2023. The final report, we've moved up a bit. That report will be due June 9th, 2023, and that should encompass the October 1st through May 19th period. So we're trying to push it as far to the end of the school year because we know so many of you work up until the very end to get these applications completed. Both of these reports are cumulative, and the data that will be submitted to us just includes sort of your overall number of foster youth high school seniors in your baseline, as well as the number of applications that were completed, and we use that information to determine a completion rate. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk a bit about the web grants verification. One thing that I will mention as well, all of the information and the policies and procedures have been updated for 22-23. I'm going to drop that link in the chat so you can figure out or find where to access it on our website. And the information that Jessica is sharing as well about web grants will also be on that web page of policies and procedures.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Sarah. You can go to the next slide. So I'm going to provide just a broad overview about the two different methods that are available to verify FAFSA and CADAA completion for your students. As Sarah mentioned, the manual has further information, and we will provide later this fall a date to be determined, a more robust in-depth training for anyone that needs a refresher or anyone who's new to the challenge. But essentially, there are two different ways that you can verify financial aid application completion for your students. Some counties actually might prefer to use both methods, but it's really up to you. So the first method is web grants for institutions through the administrator's account. And this has been one that we've had since the beginning of the challenge. It's still an option for counties that are interested in using this method. Essentially for this, you work with the California Student Aid Commission or CSAC to get a login credential to be able to have access to the administrator's account. You get approval from your superintendent to sign off on this form, indicate which schools are in your county, and then you have access to this system. The difference with this system, and this is sort of the old system, is for each school that's in your county that you have access to within the account, you can run various reports for your foster youth students to verify their FAFSA completion. But you have to look up students one by one. It can be a little more time consuming, particularly for larger counties. And you look up these students one by one based on the high school that they're attending. And so you can run reports by each high school to see FAFSA completion for those students. But I think, as I mentioned, for the larger counties, it's often not the preferred method. It can work great, though, maybe for smaller counties that don't have as many schools in their county or as many students. It might not be that complicated or time-consuming of a process. But given that that was a little bit more of a time-consuming process, we worked with the California Student Aid Commission to develop a new method, the Winzip Secure File Transfer System, which is much more easier to use, much more time efficient. And so I want to spend a little bit more time sharing about this new system because it was designed specifically for all of you with the FYSCPs to support you in the data component of the FAFSA challenge. So with this system, you're able to do batch verification of your foster youth students. And so it does require an initial configuration that you have to get set up. You don't have to fill out this whole Web Grants Administrator's Access form or anything like that. There's not that paperwork that you have to do with the typical Web Grants and for institutions account. But you get the initial system set up. It's a little technical to get set up. Sometimes it's helpful if you've got a tech person in your department to assist, but once it's set up, it's very easy and user-friendly to use. And the way that it works, and I'll go a little bit more in depth in the next few slides, but just kind of in a broad overview, is you'll have a spreadsheet. You list who your foster youth students are from your CalPAS 5.7 report, simply adding their name and date of birth and SSID, and then you upload it into your system, and then it's essentially matched. It's not a very long process. It's automated, and then you can do it as many times as you want, and it spits out the report with all of the robust financial aid completion data. And again, on the slide, we have the link to the FAFSA Challenge Policies and Procedures Manual, where you can get more information about these two different options. Next slide. So I want to spend a little more time talking about the Winzip file, because this is a new process that we want to make sure folks know is available for them to use. So this kind of walks you through the general flow, but you just log into your Winzip file system. You'll be given unique credentials to log in through a secure system. You have your Excel sheet that you've added your students on there, who your foster youth are that are eligible for this challenge, those high school seniors in foster care. And you simply just upload or drag and drop the file into the system, and then it just automatically verifies those students. And then depending on the size of your county, how many students are on your list, a report will be generated in anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. And then they'll just send you an email when it's ready, and you'll be able to go in and download the report. And as I said before, you can do this as many times as you want. When it comes to FAFSA verification data, the CADAA instantly goes into the system. The FAFSA can take about 2 weeks to get posted into the system. So just to be aware, there is sometimes that lag with the FAFSA data, but it's all in there, so you can run that report as often as you'd like. So I want to actually show you what the Excel sheet looks like, so you can see what type of data is available to you, because it's much more robust than just did they fill out their FAFSA or California DREAM Act application. It actually gives you a wide range of information, so that it's not just about did they do the application, yes or no. We want to make sure, did they not just do it, but did they get it done correctly? Because what happens a lot of the times is there's different errors that can happen along the way. And this report gives you all that additional information, so you can help students troubleshoot any issues, get them connected to support to make sure that that FAFSA really did get processed and they get that money or they get that Cal Grant. So let me share my screen real quick. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see this up on the screen. So this is just a sample report, and I wanted to walk you through it to give you a sense of the type of data that you can get to utilize to support students. So what you see here, the fields in green, that's the data that you upload. That's from your CalPAS report, your SSID, the student's last name, first name, and date of birth. You don't have to know the CSAC ID. That gets populated in the report that gets shared with you. So you upload that information, and then starting in the yellow is the information that you get sent back to you. So it's actually much more than just the FAFSA and the CADAA. As you know, for many of your foster youth, they'll also be eligible for the Chafee grant application, which is up to $5,000 in grant aid that students can access if they've been in care, at least one day between the ages of 16 and 18. And it'll let you know if that application also got submitted. So you'll see, did they fill out that application? Was there a successful match to make sure that they're actually verified as foster youth? That happens automatically, but sometimes, right, with anything, there can be errors. So that'll let you know if that was matched with the system to determine their foster youth status. And it'll also let you know, was it matched with their FAFSA and CADAA application? Was there any glitches with that process as well? That could be something you can follow up with the students about if you notice, that's funny, it looks like they submitted their FAFSA, it looks like they filled out their Chafee grant, but something's not matching, let's follow up on that. And then it'll even let you know further down the road, was that actually awarded, and did everything go through with them getting the money? Sometimes maybe they don't list the right school, or there could be other issues along in the process. Moving along to the blue or purple kind of ish color is further information about the Cal Grant. And this is really critical. This is where we see a lot of issues. So, for students to get the Cal Grant, for most of the programs, you have to have at least a 2.0 GPA. And the schools generally submit their GPAs, but sometimes there's issues with that. Some schools don't submit the GPA, or sometimes they submit the GPA, but they don't have the correct information for the student, or it doesn't match on their FAFSA application, or a lot of our youth move around a lot. And so the school that submitted the GPA is not the school that they listed on the FAFSA. So there's a lot of troubleshooting that can happen around that GPA component, where maybe they filled out their applications, but if that GPA isn't on file, they can miss out on thousands of dollars. So this gives you that information too. It lets you know, was their GPA submitted by their school? Did it match with their application? And then of course, the thing we're all curious about is, was their FAFSA or California DREAM Act submitted, yes or no? It'll also let you know if there was an error with the application. That's something that can happen too. Yeah, they filled it out, but something's wrong. Let's follow up with the student, see if we can figure out that mistake and help them get that corrected. And then similarly, you know, did the Cal Grant actually get awarded along the process as well? It'll even let you know the date that the student submitted their FAFSA or California DREAM Act application. That can be useful in supporting them as well. The high school code, that goes all back to that GPA. So that's letting you know which high school submitted that GPA and the high school name. And again, this is all helpful information in case there's any issues with that GPA. And there are deadlines around GPA submission. So that's another really critical role that FYSCPs can play, is making sure that if we notice any errors with GPA, folks can be informed of that to assist students to, you know, fix any issues that may have occurred. Now, we added this year in the green 2 new fields to additionally assist counties in troubleshooting any errors. Errors can happen for a lot of reasons, but sometimes the student's name doesn't match. So maybe the name and the exact spelling that the school has on file is different than the name the student put on file on their FAFSA. That's one common error that can happen. And so if the names don't match, sometimes then you know, that doesn't get processed. So we added a new field that has this first name, last name, date of birth match. That'll let you know if there's an error with the matching process between the name or date of birth. That can give you a clue about what might have happened if you're seeing that, looks like their FAFSA was submitted, but there's something going on with that GPA. That'll kind of point you in the right direction if it's something around name or date of birth. And that can help you follow up and figure out, is it an error on the FAFSA or the school submission and things of that nature. There's also another field that's been added called Gpa Holes. So again, similarly, if there's some kind of mistake or error with the matching with GPA and their FAFSA or California DREAM Act application, sometimes their GPA gets placed on a hold. And then what the student would need to do is actually follow up with the California Student Aid Commission to figure out what that hold's about and fix the issue. But it'll also let you know if there's a hold on their GPA. Similarly, you can work with that student to get that fixed. So, you know, these new fields are designed, again, to help you try to identify what issues might be, inform students, and get them connected to support with CSAC to fix these issues. So, you know, this is just a sample report, and we have on this Excel sheet too, a legend with a key with examples to help you remember all the different terms. But I think it's a really helpful tool now that folks will be able to use with the Winzip file. And, you know, Sarah is available. So if people haven't yet set up their Winzip file, they can work with Sarah to get that set up, get that configured. And then if any issues happen along the way that are student level, that's where you work with the California Student Aid Commission to get that issue fixed with their application. Let me stop there. So that is my crash course on the Winzip file. And again, we'll have a more in-depth training later on if anyone needs more information or has any other questions. And if you have any questions that come up right now, you know, just put those in the chat and we can also answer those.
Yes,
so
please.
That's all I got.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. Yes, that was a crash course in WinSCP. But again, it's so much easier than looking up students sort of one by one in web grants for institutions. And it's so nice to see the improvements to the actual template. So now that counties can see if there is an issue with, you know, the name, the date of birth, the GPA, it's just gonna, again, help kind of troubleshoot so those students are able to get their financial aid in a timely manner. Jed, it looks like, do you have a question?
Yeah. Is this accessible to WinSCP? Is this accessible to departments other than the county, education department? Is this accessible to LA County Probation and DCFS, or just to LACO in Los Angeles?
Sure. So that's a great question, and it's actually one that we've been getting more frequently as more child welfare agencies in particular are really engaged in the challenge. As it currently stands, the only organizations or institutions that have access to WinSCP are the foster youth services coordinating programs within county offices of education, as well as homeless education liaisons, either within county offices of education or within individual schools and districts. It is education data. I mean, this is definitely something we could elevate and ask CSAC, but they already have a lot of sort of existing agreements in place around data sharing. Since many of the institutions that are accessing WinSCP also upload data to the same system. So there's already a lot of sort of pre-existing privacy and security measures in place. But it's definitely an ask that we can explore further and see what it would look like to enable more folks within different departments in the county, like child welfare and probation, to access that data. I think it's worth an exploratory conversation, and one that we can connect about as well.
Yeah, no rush.
Yeah.
One less system I have to, I feel compelled to access, the better, but thank you.
Yeah. But in the meantime, for all of our, county partners, our child welfare and probation partners, that information, is shared with your county office of ed,
yes,
your FYCP program. So that, there's a lot of communication that can happen, based off of the reports and who's completed the FAFSA, who hasn't, who has issues with their application, et cetera. So that's been another really great feature of this tool, to help, figure out which caseworkers we need to get on board and to help with some of the outreach. And again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. And like Jessica mentioned, we will be doing a more in-depth training and resource development on interpreting the findings of the data that is matched within that WinSCP template. So lots more to come on that. But if you have not yet had WinSCP set up, please email me and I'll help sort of coordinate that with CSAC so you can get access to that system as soon as possible. With that being said, I am going to turn it over to our wonderful co-presenter today from the California Department of Education. We have Deborah Avalos joining us. She will be talking about SB 860 and the new FAFSA for All mandate. So Deborah, I'm passing the baton to you.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Deborah Avalos, and I'm a consultant with the California Department of Education in the Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program. And I'm going to share some information with you regarding FAFSA completion in light of SB 860 and the new AB 469 FAFSA for All students legislation. Next slide, please. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to go over AB 469, which is the FAFSA for All California students legislation and the implications of that law. And I'll also discuss some information around the FYCP implementation of SB 860, data reporting requirements, and share some resources with you. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's discuss AB 469 FAFSA for All implications. So AB 469 requires that on or before September 1st of 2022, so just earlier this month, and each year thereafter, the Commission and the CDE are to facilitate the completion of the FAFSA or the California DREAM Act application by requiring CDE to share the current school year's roster of pupils with the Commission, and then the Commission is to match that data on pupil completion of financial aid forms. Next slide, please. So the FYCP's role in this new AB 469 process, since it's done at the LEA and state level, it can still remain relatively the same as it was with SB 860. So FYCPs are to coordinate services in their county. So FYCPs can coordinate FAFSA completion for the foster youth of the county with the LEAs by providing training to the LEAs on how to complete the FAFSA or how to collect the data. In addition, they can follow up with the counselors to check in and see how, like, the status and provide technical assistance if needed. And FYCPs can help facilitate the process of data completion for foster youth in the county. Next slide, please. So let's cover how the FYCP is still implementing SB 860, or what that will look like. So FYCPs will still need to describe in their FYCP plan how the program will coordinate efforts to ensure, to the extent possible, the completion of the FAFSA or California DREAM Act application for foster youth. So that we're in a 3-year cycle of the FYCP plan already. And so this was already completed in that plan for the next 3 years. And going forward, this will still be in the FYCP plan, just explaining how FYCPs will coordinate efforts for this work. So going forward with AB 469, the FAFSA for all students legislation, FYCPs can describe in the plan what ways they will coordinate efforts to continue to work with the LEAs in their county around foster youth FAFSA completion, such as the things we discussed previously around providing trainings or checking up with coordinators or counselors around technical assistance or data or any other questions they may have. Next slide, please. Okay, so data reporting requirements, I'll go over quickly. So starting in 22-23, FYCPs will no longer be required to include FAFSA or California DREAM Act completion rates in the end of year report data. And this is data will no longer be necessary for SB 860 requirements as it was last year, because this data will be available at the state level. So beginning in 22-23 school year, LEAs are required to ensure completion and data submission. And then the CDE will receive that data from, with CSAC. So that data will already exist, and the coordinators are not having to collect that or report that any longer. Next slide, please. So finally, let's take a look at just some resources that we have at the CD for you around this. Last year, we presented to our FYCPs on SB 860, so you can view a copy of that slide deck along with guidance handout that includes FAQs on the FYCP Hub. And if you have any questions at all on SB 860 or the AB 469, you can feel free to contact our team. You can email the foster youth inbox there, and that's on the slide. And the next slide, please. We also encourage you to work with your foster youth district and county contacts if you have any questions, and I'm sure you already have these, but if you don't, they're linked here for you from the CDE webpage. And finally, that concludes my presentation. So thank you for having me, and I'll stick around for the remainder of the presentation and monitor questions in the chat. And I'll also include our email inbox in the chat. So if you need to follow up with us, you can get that and email us at any time. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Deborah, and I appreciate you sticking around if there's any questions that come up. I did see one question in the chat that I'd like to ask really quick, and it's about whether or not the data match in regards to AB 469 will be disaggregated for foster youth. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so currently what I know from our data team on that question is that they're looking into it, and at this time they're trying to work out the feasibility of disaggregating by county. So we will have more information on that soon, hopefully.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right. Well, I'm really excited about our next presentation as well. So joining us from Los Angeles County Office of Ed today, we have LaShawna Jenkins, and she's also joined by her partner from the Los Angeles County Probation Department, Jed Minoff. So I'm really excited for them to talk a little bit about the work that they've done to really put a more concerted effort behind ensuring that probation supervised foster youth are also completing the FAFSA and CADAA. So without further ado, I will turn it over to them.
Thank you for the introduction, Sarah, and also thank you to John Burton Advocate Youth for having Los Angeles County here to share our best practices for supporting our students in foster care that are supervised by probation. Again, I'm LaShawna Jenkins, Project Director of LACO Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program, and I'll turn it over to my co-presenter for an introduction.
Hi, I'm Jed Minoff, and I am the director for LA County Probation's, we call it the Youth Development Services Program. It's a combination of our independent living program, our extended foster care program for youth under WIC 450, transition jurisdiction, and the transition and other housing initiatives we do for youth exiting foster care who are also under the supervision of probation.
Let's go ahead and jump into the first slide. Okay, so following the 2021 school year, LACO disaggregated and examined the FAFSA CADAA challenge data through an equity lens, which included factors such as race and ethnicity, gender, school type, responsible agency, family maintenance versus foster placements, and if the parents still held educational rights. Through this analysis, we identified 3 priority populations that had statistically significant lower rates of FAFSA and CADAA completion. And those populations were students attending non-public schools, our African-American students in foster care, and then also students residing in suitable placement served by probation. In the bar charts, you'll see that during the 2021 school year, child welfare supervised youth had almost twice the odds of FAFSA completion compared to probation-involved youth in suitable placement. To help understand the size and scope of LA County in 2021, there were 1,071 students in high school in foster care. 117 of those students, which is 11%, were served by probation. Through targeted efforts across LACO and probation, the rate of FAFSA CADAA completion amongst foster youth served by probation nearly doubled. So we're happy to say that. It increased from 37.7% in 2021 to 72% in 21-22. So we constantly give ourselves a round of applause for that. And so you guys are welcome to do the same. Next slide, please. So through the LA County FAFSA and CADAA work group, which is comprised of various stakeholders from LACO, probation, child welfare, community-based organizations such as our partners here, John Burton Advocate for Youth, and others, and also local education agencies, targeted strategies were developed to improve rates of completion for fosters supervised by probation. These strategies included, as you see here, leveraging data, cross-sector collaboration, dedicated staffing, engaging short-term residential treatment program, which are SCRTP providers, and then also ensuring one-on-one assistance for each youth. Next slide, please. So during the 21-22 school year, we were quite intentional about sharing both overall aggregate FAFSA and CADAA completion rates, as well as our priority population completion rates. We wanted to be transparent about what was not happening with the intent of garnering support for our students. This data was shared with our foster youth liaisons at our quarterly meetings. We also shared the data with partners from our executive advisory council meetings. And then of course, we shared the data in our work group meetings. So during our bi-monthly work group meetings, we took time to review the data and strategize on how to increase completion rates. We all became quite familiar with Jamboard during that process. We also shared student level data with the districts, child welfare, and probation by way of our educational passport system, which is our data sharing system between all school districts within Los Angeles County, designed specifically to share foster youth information. During the past 2 years, we made significant enhancements to this system that allowed us to upload these California Student Aid Commission reports on a monthly basis. And as a result, our partners from the districts, probation, and DCFS, or child welfare, were able to log in and download their respective student level reports. So I'll go ahead and turn it back to Jed so that he can talk about what exactly they did with the reports.
Thank you, Lashana. I'll say first, well, let me focus on the reports themselves, but I think there's another story to tell. We could do that on later slides, just about the enhanced collaboration between LACO and probation that occurred over this past school year. One of the big changes was we now had access to the education passport system. So we were able to compare our internal log that we had created that contained all of what we believed were the seniors in probation foster care, and we were able to compare that with the log that we received from LACO, and see where there were discrepancies, and then try to drill down and determine why there was a discrepancy. Was that on the part of probation not updating its information? That a youth say was, we saw in our own internal databases that they were a junior, but in fact they were now a senior, and so we had to update that information? Or was that something that LACO needed to update in their internal tracking system? So we became quite familiar with the education passport system and regular communication with our LACO partners to make sure that we were both looking at the same data sets. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay, back to me. Okay, so in addition to facilitating the bi-monthly work group meetings, Jed and I also hosted a meet and greet between the Foster Youth Services Coordinating Program staff and his ILP coordinators. This provided an opportunity for our staff members to put names to faces, share roles and responsibilities, and then also connect with people in their respective regions. We made sure that they had contact information. So that was done by sharing rosters so that they were able to get in contact with one another. What else did we do? So that's about what we did. But we just wanted to make sure that they knew who their contact person was. We also had our senior program specialist reach out to them and invite them to their regional learning network meetings. So in our county, we've broken the county up into 5 regions, and in each region, they will host a meeting with the DCFS or Child Welfare Agency, Probation Agency, and community-based organizations within their specific region. And so with that, they were inviting partners to those meetings as well, and even hosting FAFSA workshops in their respective regions. So those are some of the ways we were collaborating. Jed, do you want to speak to resource and data sharing?
Sure. We talked about the data sharing. I would say that the headline is probation foster youth increase FAFSA registration, but the fact is, what we did well was, as I learned from another role I had in the past, we shamelessly stole, and we were more than happy to piggyback on what LACO was doing. So, if LACO was putting on a FAFSA workshop, I think, where we did a better job than the year before was marketing that workshop. Having our ILP transition coordinators become much more familiar with their, LACO counterparts. We have 2 LACO education, I don't know what their official titles are.
Counselors.
But I mean, they, counselors, but, they're so engaged and so accessible to our ILP transition coordinators and to the deputy probation officers, that, it was an easy flow of communication. And then we can get that information out to the STRTPs and other stakeholders to become engaged in those workshops. Probation also, along with LACO, did its own workshop. And we had the transition coordinators providing the aid during those workshops, but the LACO education counselors really giving us the confidence by backing us up, by being able to easily go through the information with the students, as well as the FAFSA enrollment system. So next slide. So I think the big takeaway from this slide is we marketed the FAFSA challenge with, I think, more tenacity, more on a regular basis to our STRTP provider partners. We did this during quarterly meetings with them. We started out in October of 2021 during that quarterly meeting. I think we asked Jessica to come back and she had done that the year before, but to talk about the FAFSA challenge. So, I think that there was this buildup of what we had started the previous year, even though we weren't as successful as we wanted to be. But we just really kind of kept at it and kept through emails, letting the STRTP providers know that, the FAFSA challenge is something that you're involved in. You have a specific role to make sure that, the youth attend workshops, that they have an email that they're able to use when they're registering for the FAFSA, and just consistently reminded them, because, like all of us, we have so much on our plate that it just can easily fall off on what we're supposed to do and what's most important. So I think we made it what is, to the STRTPs, that they should feel that this was very important, and they responded. I think our transition coordinators were a lot more engaged with the STRTPs, and I think by saying FAFSA challenge, that got their attention. Transition coordinators, when I say transition coordinators, I am ILP, independent living program coordinators, and the case carrying deputy probation officers of the probation child welfare youth also had a better understanding of what their roles were with regards to the FAFSA. And I think that this year that's going to even increase. Constant engagement, constant, sharing of information, the neon sign, FAFSA challenge, make sure it's on your radar. And I think I learned that in part from Jessica Petras of Gpa, who made sure that it was always part of, of my short list of things to do, and I'm grateful for that. Is this still us? Okay. So here I think I said of a lot of what we did. I want to focus also on what we shared with LACO. So I had mentioned that very often we would see a youth from the list that was provided initially by LACO, but then we had access to on our own, that, you know, they were listed as a senior, but, you know, we found that they were already, you know, that they were in fact a junior, or we thought they were a senior, and LACO said that they were a junior. So we had to triage that, and we triaged that by connecting with the case carrying DPO and asking the question, you know, is this youth a senior or junior? And, you know, because they would more often be hands-on, you know, they would know. Sometimes they weren't sure themselves, and then, you know, they would have to ask the STRTP. But, you know, we didn't just allow for those questionable students, questionable meaning we didn't know what grade level they were in, to just be put to the side. We really did try to triage that and find out, and then share that information with our LACO partner, so they can update. I think the other thing that we did well is when, you know, we were finding we were having difficulty engaging the youth, because, you know, they wouldn't come to the phone, or they weren't at the STRTP when our ILP transition coordinator was trying to work with them. We would let our LACO education counselors know, and they would then reach out to the schools. And I think, you know, they worked with the schools to work with the student to have them register. So, you know, I think that, you know, there was that constant communication between our two organizations, and within different, you know, levels and staff within those organizations. We put on a specific event. We call it the Probation College Summit. In the past, that used to be a live event. But for the past few years, because of COVID, it's been a virtual event, and it's highlighted registration, or rather FAFSA registration has been highlighted. We also invited community colleges to be a part of it, to hopefully entice some of the youth who were truly interested in going to college. And so we would have those community college go into a separate meeting room with the students to talk about, you know, what it is to be a college student. And that worked out well. So in a strange way, I think COVID actually increased our ability to engage youth virtually, to have them register virtually. And, you know, that just increased our rate of registration, you know, strongly, you know, in a big way, and you know, surprised us, but you know, we're very positive about the outcome. That's it. Lashana, do you have anything to add to that? Oh, you're on mute.
Just wanted to add one thing that Jed did with his team. He created a document, I guess it was a shared document, and he held his team accountable. He had a list of all of the students that were identified as being involved in probation and suitable placement, and he required them to put documentation on that sheet for each student as to why they have not completed it. So I thought that was great to just hold his teammates or his staff accountable, to make sure that there was a reason why it wasn't being done. So if it wasn't done, they were making sure it was getting done. So that was, I think that hugely assisted us in increasing the numbers, Jed. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And I forgot about that. I think because we're talking to, you know, education folks, but, you know, we would have our DPOs, or rather our transition coordinators, really sort of write out the story of engagement with the youth. And, you know, and sometimes that ended in a registration, and sometimes it didn't. But it told us the story nonetheless, you know, whether, you know, and how difficult it is sometimes to work with these youth and how many hands go into it. So you know, even if we didn't reach our goal, we could at least say, well, you know, we tried, you know, look at how many times we reached out, and look what happened.
Yes. Yes. So we'll continue to collaborate and continue to increase numbers, and continue to have success with our students. So again, thank you for having us here today, JB.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's so amazing to hear that you were able to double the number of FAFSA and CADAA completion in 1 year. And that is just such a remarkable success. And I'm sitting here brainstorming other ways that we can really highlight that throughout the work on the challenge this upcoming year, because it is so imperative that we really think and coordinate around how to better support those youth who have dual jurisdiction with child welfare and probation. So thank you again for being here and sharing all of your expertise. And again, I want to encourage folks to utilize the chat, utilize the Q&A function if you have any questions for any of our panelists. I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next portion of our presentation today. So we have some really amazing guest speakers from some of our winning counties from last year's challenge. So I wanted to just very quickly share. So we have Stephen Johnson from Riverside County, and last year they reached a 72% completion rate in the large county category. We're also joined by Vanessa Moreno in Fresno County, and in our medium-sized category, they reached a 93.8% completion rate. Our LA partners are also here, and will be weighing in on our strategies for success. And I have to give them a shout out because they had the largest number of FAFSAs completed last year, with 625 FAFSAs or CADAAs submitted as part of their challenge, which is just enormous. And then we also have our partners from Tulare. Courtney Venegas is here, and Tulare in our very small county category reached a 100% completion rate, I think for probably the 5th time. So really glad that they could join us and talk about the strategies that have helped them reach these completion rates over the years. So these are the questions I'm going to ask them on our panel today, are really based off of questions that I get all year long from our participating foster youth services coordinating programs. And the first set of questions is really focused on, you know, what are the lessons learned? What is the sort of sage advice that you would give another county who is working on this challenge? And how are you sort of collaborating with your community partners? So these are some very common questions. So I'm just going to open it up with the first question, which is, what are the greatest lessons learned that have helped you increase your completion rate in your county? And anyone can feel free on the panel to just sort of jump in. My hope is that this feels conversational. And if any folks listening in would like to also ask a question, please feel free to utilize the chat or the Q&A.
I can go ahead and start. My one piece of advice would be to start early. The earlier you start, the better you're going to be able to overcome any of the problems that you run into. By checking through web grants, if you see that they didn't do something, you'll have time to fix that. Just the earlier you start, the more you'll get completed.
Absolutely. Great point.
Hi, everyone. I can kind of answer that a little bit. So my name is Vanessa Moreno. I'm with the Fresno County Office of Education, or now Superintendent of Schools Office. I think one lesson learned is I wait a little bit longer now to run my 5.7 report. I was initially doing that probably in about August, but just over the years, I've learned to wait a lot later, you know, a little bit closer to October 1st. There's just a lot of discrepancies with that report if you run it too soon. So I think that's definitely one lesson that we've learned over the years.
To know. Other thoughts or ahas?
I would share this, these are all, I believe, education folks on the, but if you would share with your child welfare or probation child welfare counterpart that, if they can have a designated individual who is responsible for tracking the data, maintaining the log that we talked about, really understanding the tech around that log and how the those who are working directly with the youth can access that log and write in their story of engagement. That's essential. We have someone, they're a program analyst, and they're now they're going to another organization. They were promoted. So that's going to be one of our challenges this year is doing as well with that law, because they were really exceptional. Even though they never talked to a single youth about registering, by keeping the order of the information, it was such a huge advantage.
That's a great strategy. Any other thoughts or responses to this question?
I'd just like to add to what Jed and I just presented on, just recognizing that it doesn't have to be done in a silo, recognizing that you have partners from child welfare, probation, and the community-based organizations that you can collaborate with to do this work. And I stopped. There's also the CSUs, UCs, private universities, and community colleges. So just reaching out to every entity out there and collaborating to support our students in getting to where they need to be.
Excellent.
I definitely agree with that. And you guys' presentation was excellent, and it really mirrors what we do here in Tulare County. And I realize we're fortunate because we're a smaller county, but we have a sheet exactly like you, that log that you talked about that everybody adds to. And we are not the only ones doing it one-on-one with the youth. This kind of goes into the next question, but we had this past year, we had school counselors, ILP workers, STRTP staff, my team. We've had Next Step staff for the community college, and even CASAs were helping to complete the FAFSAs. And that's how we reached 100%. It was not us alone. We just coordinated where all that information went and made sure it got done.
Yes, I'm taking notes.
Yeah, excellent examples. And I think along the lines of the next question, I'd love to hear from other counties about who provides that one-on-one assistance to foster youth as they're completing their applications. We know that they really benefit from having one-on-one high-touch support. The application itself is very technical. And I think even furthermore, many just need help getting everything set up to complete the application, like getting their social security card and getting their social security number, thinking through the list of 10 schools that they want to include on the application. There's a lot of sort of prep work. So one of the questions we often get asked from counties is who's doing that one-on-one support? And I'd love to sort of hear more about the folks that you all have leaned on.
So in Los Angeles County, we have Maria Teo. She's our program activity specialist. I believe she's here. And she is responsible for organizing many of our FAFSA Challenge workshops. And she collaborates, as Jed mentioned, with our partners from probation, child welfare, the community colleges. We'll have to start reaching out to CASAs to host the workshops. And at that time, again, the students are put into individual rooms with an adult that supports them with completing it. That's what we've been doing since the onset of the pandemic. So that again, that's what we do. Maria also offers FAFSA completion workshops for school site personnel. So that's pretty much how we get it done. We do have a secret weapon for this up and coming school year. So Riverside, watch out. We've hired 7 program specialists, and these individuals, in addition to supporting our students at the STRTPs, they will also be receiving a list of students that they're responsible for supporting and completing the FAFSA and CADAA. So we're hoping that we can win it this year. So again, watch out, Riverside.
The competition is heating up. I love it.
hey, we embrace the challenge, but it's all for the better good. For us, really working with DPSS to be able to provide any kind of access to Social Security numbers if they're having challenges reaching that. Working with our partners at Riverside Community College District, and then just kind of identifying, who's going to be providing that one-on-one support. Is it going to be us? Is it going to be the districts? Is it going to be RCCD? And we also have our social workers as well that are assigned cases, so they are also providing that one-on-one assistance. But just tracking, just really keeping track of the data is probably the critical element. Being able to put in service notes, and then as we're going through it, we're logging, hey, did they complete it, and then following up with the CSAC reporting tool to be able to confirm if it actually did go through, or really following up with what happened with the application, why isn't it showing up. So that's, any questions?
I would just dovetail on what both Stephen and LaShawna said, or what I got from that was the more the better. The more people, whether from the Office of Education or from the Child Welfare Agency or your partners, the STRTPs, who know how to register, the youth, work with them virtually. So, I know that our DCFS, for instance, they, are normally way ahead of probation with registering their youth for FAFSA. But, they had some staffing issues this year. So, if one organization is challenged, and which very often happens, another can pick up the slack. So really happy about those those program specialists, LaShawna, because we may need them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So our next series of questions is really focused on how do you sort of organize the challenge? What sort of strategies have helped you institutionalize it? And so a question that we get often, and I'm sure that this will vary sort of based off of the size of your foster youth population in your county, but is how often do you run the 5.7 report? And we heard a little bit from Vanessa, like you don't want to run it too early because you're going to miss some youth who are in, high school seniors in foster care on October 1st, which is the start of the challenge and when the applications open. But how often do you run that report sort of based off of the number of youth in your county? And then also what tools do you use to track them?
So in Riverside County, we run ours on a weekly basis, typically on Mondays. Usually when we log into CalPads, it'll let us know if, California Department of Social Services has updated the data on there in CalPads. And so we pull it on a weekly basis, but we're also using that 5.7 for a couple other things other than just the challenge itself. So when we download that and we have it, we're building a cumulative 5.7 list, and we're also building a historical list to kind of help us track things like mobility and being able to see different kind of enrollment level things to be able to maybe flag for AB 216 follow-ups. And so this is also with our historical file that we build. It helps us identify how long they were possibly in foster care, as well as leveraging the educational passport system as well. Some of the tools we're using is Microsoft Access and Microsoft Power BI to process data. You could keep it simpler with Microsoft Access and Excel if you wanted to. We also are using spreadsheets to be able to provide and present data to our counseling team and our social workers to identify who those youth are and where they're at in the process, as well as utilizing web forms to be able to collect, basically do data entry and supply that back to the main data source. And so just kind of some strategies, just, really putting some things into place as far as building out your cumulative list. You can keep it really simple with just spreadsheets and keeping, identifying new kids that are coming on, or you can start, once you've kind of built one process, kind of stick with that as you can, be able to build improvements while that's still operating. That's kind of what we've had to do, is build things and improve it on the fly. So just once you've kind of built the basic strategy, keep going with that as you are looking to build improvements on it.
I'll also just make a quick plug as well. So on our FAFSA CADAA Challenge policies and tools webpage, which I dropped in the chat, but I'll relink it again. We have a Excel spreadsheet. It's called a FAFSA CADAA Challenge, I think, internal tracking tool or tracking spreadsheet. And in that, it's just a very simple Excel spreadsheet that will help you sort of start to build that cumulative baseline. And it will also auto calculate, if the student, as an example, was in your system on October 1st, but then they left your county on October 16th, and they didn't complete a FAFSA, it has all of the sort of logic in place to exclude them from the FAFSA challenge and your overall baseline number and completion rate, being that they have to be in the county for 30 or more days in order to be eligible for the challenge. So if they leave your county early, before 30 days, they're excluded. If they are in your county for less than 30 days, but they do complete a FAFSA, then they are included. And so it does all of that sort of behind the scenes math to give you your completion rate and to track your cumulative list. So that is available and updated for this year's FAFSA challenge. And you can access it again on our website.
We actually use that, but we've added additional columns to the sheet, and we have it in a shared drive, so everybody updates it with extensive notes. And we use that, and then we use Foster Focus, their FAFSA challenge tools. And I know not every county can do it because we're on the smaller side, but about once a week, I'll compare both the lists and make sure they're accurate and add or detract students as they come and go.
Hi, so in Fresno County, we actually do about monthly. We'll run the 5.7 report. Also, in addition to that, we do receive lists from each district. We have about 34 in our county. So we do receive that list. And also kind of want to mention a little bit of background of Fresno County because it might not make sense to everybody. So there are 7 what we call education services specialists. And so this is basically our job. This is what we do. We meet with all 9th through 12th grade students. Of course, the senior students, this is what we do, FAFSA, college application, JP. So each ESS is assigned school districts. So we might have maybe 4 or 5, each of us. So what I do as the lead for this FAFSA challenge is, along with sending them the 5.7 report, they have to compare it with their district list as well. I also send like a missing FAFSA report for each ESS and their districts. So just, just a reminder twice a month, like, hey, these students are still missing the FAFSA, basically like what's going on. So I do require, a reason for each student as to why it hasn't been completed. So that's also something that has helped us in the past, whether it be that students just MIA, the student left for whatever reason, or the student refused services. And then I do also require a weekly email from each education services specialist, just an update of who they completed that week. And yeah, so that's basically how we do it. Again, we also use that simple Excel spreadsheet. We did add a few columns to that. But yeah, I know other counties, just hearing from other counties, I know every year it's a lot different than our county because we do a lot of it here internally. But I like to, hear everybody else's, the way they approach the challenge. It's very interesting to me.
We have another question sort of along these lines about tracking your high school seniors who are eligible for the challenge, kind of tracking completion. The question is if any of you are tracking the reasons why a student is a non-completer or did not complete the application. And they reference that they have a large number of youth who are on a certificate of completion track. And then they kind of show up year after year because they're staying enrolled within that district to get support. And so they're kind of curious about if you're tracking non-completers and reasons for non-complete. And then I'm also just kind of curious to get a general sense of your efforts around completion for students who are maybe non-diploma track or certificate of completion and what you do to increase those rates.
So we do track that, and so we also are collecting anytime a student, for whatever reason, did not want to complete the FAFSA. So just so we have a record that, hey, we attempted to help, and this was, and we always try and circle back to, but we flagged that, and we have also identified any kind of special needs that. So yes, we are tracking it, and we're doing that through our web forms through data entry. But it can be done as simple as just a field on a spreadsheet as well.
Great. So the next question is about web grants, and I know some of you have already spoken to this, but I'd be really curious to hear, sort of based off of, again, your total population of foster youth high school seniors. I know there's a lot of variance. We have some very small counties and then some very large counties like Riverside and LA. So I'd love to hear sort of which version of web grants you're using to verify FAFSA CADAA completion and how often you're doing that verification.
So we, Tulare County, on the smaller side, but still, I find the WinSCP secure file transfer system much easier than looking up individually. Because even though we're on the smaller side, we still have 50 to 60 seniors, so it's much easier. I was very appreciative of that. And in the beginning, we probably do it a couple times a month, but as it gets closer to the deadline, we're doing it much more frequently, even weekly or twice weekly.
We also utilize the WinSCP tool. I've kind of streamlined the process with Microsoft Access to formulate or to really populate that spreadsheet. We'll run it at least once a week. As it's getting closer to deadline, we'll run it 3 times a week, even sometimes every day. And we'll also utilize, if I'm having some issues where a counselor submitted or said that the FAFSA has been submitted, but it's not showing up, and I can kind of take a look at the individual student and see if there's name variations. I will populate that spreadsheet with a couple different name variations that I'm seeing, and then run that back through. And sometimes, actually, more than likely or not, I will get the name will actually match, and then we'll get the status for them. We just kind of retain that as like a manual status because a lot of it is automated on our end. But definitely would encourage you to use the WinSCP tool if you are not already using it.
Great. And then the last question we have is sort of what are some strategies that you've adopted to streamline data collection? And it sounds like some of you have already spoke to this, but is there anything else that's really sort of helped simplify the data aspects? And that it's totally fair if not.
I would just say, really once you've kind of figured out that WinSCP file, just continuing to use it. We'll end up running sometimes our juniors and our seniors through it because we do see that trend where they're kind of bouncing back and forth between juniors and seniors. And so we'll already have it collected. and it's there and it's available to us to utilize that way. We're not having to backtrack and say, oh, you know what, they are now marked as a senior. Let's go back and see, you know, or vice versa. And so, you know, I always say that the more data you have, the better. But just, you know, kind of knowing how to utilize that so that you're not, you know, overwhelmed with all of it. And then the other thing too with the tool, I'm not sure if they've addressed the issue yet, but once you kind of mark the kid as completed and you've verified it with the CSAC report, you just, you know, I've seen instances where I've reran the kid and they are no longer showing as completed. And so just kind of really either, you know, adopt the strategy that you're always going to run it, but know that, you know, whatever you've seen before, meaning if they've completed the FAFSA, then that's the final answer for the student, versus if you know, run the latest one and they're no longer showing. So just be mindful of that too. So that's just one of the other things we had kind of learned going through that process. Or once they're complete, just simply you no longer run them through the system anymore. You just run just the ones that are not complete. And it'll also go a lot faster that way too.
That's a really great point, Stephen. I think that perhaps some of those instances where they were showing as complete and then you reran them later and they were showing like some sort of issue with the application, I could see that happening with some of the multiple GPAs that are potentially submitted that could cause an issue. But we have worked very closely with CSAC to update how the data is reported in the data match spreadsheet that Jessica shared. And so if a student does end up with multiple GPAs submitted, you'll actually be able to see every school code for the institutions that have submitted a GPA and then kind of troubleshoot from there. And like we talked about as well, we are working very closely with CSAC. We will be doing some resource creation around interpreting the results from the WinSCP data match, so that if you're seeing that, you know, there's no EFC or there's a GPA hold, you sort of know what to do next. So those instructions will be coming out before that March 2nd priority deadline and before your first round of reports is due to JBay. So more to come on that issue. But I'm really, really happy to hear that for most of you, regardless of the size of your foster youth student population, that the WinSCP has been a really helpful tool that's helped, you know, make this a lot easier and less labor intensive. So I'm going to go ahead and move us to our closing section. We do have a lot of resources that we want to share today. But before I jump into the resources, I did want to announce, and I always announce this at the end because I don't want people to log in and then leave. We are doing the awards again this year. So I'm not putting that on the second slide because people hear about the awards and be like, okay, that's all I wanted to know. We are doing the awards again this year. So we will be providing awards of up to $1,000 in unrestricted funding that can be used to support your efforts on helping foster youth with post-secondary matriculation. So those awards will be announced again in March based off of that first report, that October 1st through March 2nd cumulative report. And then we'll also do another round of winners based off of the final FAFSA completion rates in June of 2023. So those awards will be a part of the challenge again this year. And we know that that helps kind of boost that healthy competitive spirit we saw today. So that being said, I will talk about our resources. So every year we update our FAFSA completion resources based off of the latest FAFSA and CADAA applications. Unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we don't get advanced copies of the FAFSA or CADAA. So we are sort of in the same position as many folks, where we are waiting for the new application to come out in October. And then we very, very quickly start taking screenshots and editing documents and doing updates based off of the latest editions. So all of these resources are available on our website and will be updated and released in mid to late October. That being said, we are still doing our annual FAFSA CADAA how-to webinars. These webinars are really intended for adult supporters of foster youth students. It will go through the application on the FAFSA and CADAA application question by question, and it will address any sort of nuance as it pertains to foster youth and how they should answer questions, what their eligibility is for independent student status. Again, our goal with that webinar is to make sure that anybody who is working one-on-one and providing that support to foster youth understand the application and can really help make sure that foster youth are answering the questions correctly. Our goal, is to make sure that they get the application done correctly the first time, and also that they qualify for independent student status so they can maximize the amount of financial aid that they're eligible for ultimately. I'm having a horrible time trying to copy paste links into the chat right now. So when I'm done screen sharing, I will include this link in the chat for folks who want to check out the updated resources. I will also be emailing all of you when these are completed and available on the website. In addition, if you would like to share information about the upcoming how-to webinars with any of the adult supporters in your community, I'll be sure to send that out to everyone who attended this webinar. They're scheduled for mid-October. You can also find the link to register on our website under the tab that says upcoming events. So all of that will be put into the chat. Jessica might already be on it. All right, so that being said, that's what's happening with our resources. Oh, one last thing. This is a question that I've been fielding recently. We are updating the financial aid guide for California foster youth. It will again be available in English and Spanish. So when that is completed in mid-October, I will be disseminating an order form for counties who would like to request hard copies of those resources. So be on the lookout for that as well come October. And then, of course, if there's any sort of technical assistance or training needs, I'm always an email, phone call away. So please feel free to reach out. My email is in the chat and also on our last slide here. So that being said, we have a couple minutes. I'll check and see if there's any questions. It looks like most of the questions got asked and answered. Anything you want to highlight from the questions, Jessica? I'm trying to quickly.
No, I think that's it. I did put the link in the chat for the upcoming FAFSA CADAA training webinar if people want to register for that. There's also a link to a flyer in there if anyone wants to use the flyer to share with your networks as well. And then we'll also be sharing with you soon, along with our financial aid materials, a new updated high school counselor toolkit for supporting foster youth that we worked on with LACO. And what's really new about this version from prior years is that it really integrates the new legislation around AB 469 and what that means for high school counselors and how they can best support foster youth with their financial aid completion and best practices around that. So keep your eyes open for that email. We'll get that out to you probably in the next few days as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, feel free to follow up with any questions or technical assistance needs. And another major thank you to all of our presenters and panelists today. We so appreciate your commitment and dedication to this challenge and look very much forward to announcing in a few months that we've reached a statewide 70% completion rate. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. All right. Thank you.